One of the things that corporations sometimes lose in their zeal to grow their vision is the fact that, number one, greatness cannot be achieved without a team. And number two, which should really be number one, is that teammates are human first. They deal with human people issues first. It is so unethical, so cutting off the nose to spite the face, like my grandma used to say, to not pay attention to the quality of your teammates' lives at home, to make sure that the system and the team that's running your vision stays on track. The mission that we are on here at Family Structure First is making the family whole again. Everyone has to work. Everyone has to bring in some source of income, regardless of whether it's working for someone else or it's working for themselves, growing their own vision. In both cases, you'll find that a person that's healed from trauma, a person that is able to recognize triggers, has a far better chance of being successful at whatever it is that they're doing than a person who does not, than a person who doesn't pay attention to where their lives are in need of empowerment, improvement, and healing. I want to share a quick story with you if you don't mind. For those who know me, know that it was way more important for me to be available for my family, my children in particular, who were school age at the time, than it was for me to make money. Now, yes, money is very important. It's right up there next to air. However, realizing that and understanding that the system for us as Black people, especially our Black boys, there is a direct pipeline from school to prison. I refuse to allow my children to be impacted by an absent parent in the school. When I wasn't homeschooling my children and they were in public school, I would make sure I was very present, and no job could take that away from me. I vowed after this, I'm going to tell you a very quick story. I vowed after this to never ever allow an employee or anyone for that matter to dictate when I was to be a parent. I was working for a family owned furniture company in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's a good company, I thought. I thought that I'd aligned with an employer who was family oriented. I thought that I'd aligned with a company that valued the sanctuary of family. I worked my way in a very short period of time to top sales rep. And so much so that the company wanted to expand to a 24-hour service. It was an inbound call service. So they wanted to expand to 24 hours. And being the top sales rep, I was offered the position, meaning they would switch the phone lines over to my personal residence. And I had 100% exclusivity on calls that came in between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. above and beyond my regular workday shift. So for me, that was great because I was able to bring in some extra money. I was able to have 100% exclusivity, and I thought it was a win win. I built such a rapport that he'd given me keys because he'd seen that I was, dedicated to what I was doing. And he had a young son. I believe at the time he was about 6 years old. And I thought it was wonderful that, if this boy had so much as a cough, the owner was up and he was out the door going to get his son to figure out what was wrong with him. He played soccer, he played um, baseball. And so the owner was very present. And I loved that. I loved that he was very family oriented. However, what I did not realize was that those family values seemed to only extend to his family. One day I was on the phones and I was there at the office. I was on the phones and a call came through. Now, this person immediately recognized my voice and said, Miss Gates, where are you? She was almost yelling at me. And I said, what do you mean? I said, who's speaking? It was the receptionist from my son's school. And I said, "What do you mean?" I said, she said, "What are you doing? This is my third call to you. At this point, we're going to have to call not only the ambulance, but CPS because your son's temperature is now at 103." I immediately stood up. I said, this is the first time I'm hearing anything. As I stood up, the owner's office was a glass room, and you could see we made eye contact. And he stood up, he could see the look on my face. So he started moving towards me. So as I'm standing up, I'm getting the story that this is the third time the school has called to say that my son was very sick. His temperature was rising quickly, and that I needed to get there in order to take him to bring him to the hospital to find out what was going on with him. They could no longer hold him at the school. I was irate. I was livid. The owner came to me and he said, "Hey," he said, "what's going on?" And I said, Did you receive calls that my son was sick and needed me to come to the school? The school needed me to come and get it." He said, "Yeah, I did, but you were hot on the phones and I didn't want to interrupt you." And I said, "Excuse me?" I couldn't, the audacity, right? Now, there was another woman who was an older Black woman there with me and that worked with me, and we built, a really good rapport. I was referenced her as like my auntie. She could see the look on my face and overheard what was going on. So she kind of slid over and just took the phone from me, gave me my keys and my purse, and said, "Go get the baby. Take care of this later." I was outraged that someone who valued their family so much would undervalue my family just as much. I cried on the way to getting my son because anyone who knew me knew that my family came first before anything. And I thought that I'd made that clear. And I'd also thought that I'd found a company that I could work with and grow with and that aligned with my family values. That wasn't the case. I vowed at that moment to never, ever allow someone to have that much control over my life that they governed when I was to be the parent that I knew that I was to my children. Subsequently, obviously, I left that job. They called for months. The wife called apologizing so much, apologizing for her husband's actions. That was never enough for me. I felt powerless in those few minutes hearing this woman talk to me that way, knowing that my family came first before money ever could. I say this to say that sometimes an employer will lose the focus, the real focus on growing his vision and realize that a team is filled with people. And those people have to be treated in such a way that they know that they are most important. Because without an effective team, your vision stops. Nothing great happens with a solo system. No greatness happens without having strong strategic people in place in your organization. That old adage that you cut off your nose to spite your face is exactly what you do if you do not realize and value the fact that your teammates have lives at home. They have other things that are important to them above and beyond coming to work at your job. They may come to work and they may hide everything with a smile. They may cover things up in the zeal to want to do their best at their jobs. And that may work for the time being. However, it does not work for the long term, nor is it healthy for you as an employer to feel that it should work for the long term. Paying attention to your employees' needs, their social needs outside of work, their family needs outside of work should be at the top of your responsibilities. If you want to run an effective team, reduce quick turnaround because your team is only as strong as its weakest link.